but I'm happy. I'm here to discuss that. Go ahead.
I'm happy to start. First of all, somehow, just recently, he came up out of the blue and accused me of having to back down from 3 different challenges to engage him. Now, I have no idea what he's talking about. He's talking about something back in 2012. I don't know anything about that. The one incident that he did bring up was supposedly back in 2014, where I was supposedly at some convention in Salt Lake City. I haven't been in Salt Lake City. The first time in my life I was there last year, and he recognized that he was mistaken there. It wasn't me, and he sort of retracted on Facebook. But he hasn't come up and said, where I've ever backed down from him. I've never backed down from Phil, from Philip. Never backed down. But he has been wanting to engage me for quite some time. And I did a debate recently with Dr. Matt Hunt, and he seemed to make it over masks instead of worldviews. Now, the issue of masks is irrelevant if you cannot justify the preconditions of intelligibility according to your own worldview. So that's something that, that I would discuss among Christians who have that justification. Philip doesn't. But for him to make this about masks, and I don't think he's going to make it about masks. I hope he's not going to make it about masks. That just came up very recently. He says that I've been dodging him since, I think, 2012. So I want to know what his issue is with me, and I'd be happy to have a discussion about that and our respective worldviews and who can make sense of what we're doing here today.
So if we want to get into the background on that, because it's not exactly an accurate representation of what happened. So, Sai, you posted a tweet saying that you would never back down from any debate. And I pointed out that we had a arranged debate that was discussed doing at the YouTube studio I was working out of in Manhattan. This is back in June 2012, I think, like you said. I don't remember the exact date. So at the time, you had canceled because of a storm. And this, by the way, I apologize to everybody because this is stupid and boring, but since it was brought up, I guess I'll go over it. But at the time, because of the storm, you had not made the trip. So I said, okay, fine, we'll do it after, and then you never followed up. And then a couple of years later, it came up again, and again, you didn't follow up. And I had said on Twitter to you, well, if you never back down, why did that never happen? And then you said, I don't remember. And I said, well, that's a reasonable statement because you basically will debate any Tom, Dick, or Harry who's out there from what I've seen. I have no idea, especially back then, how many of you were doing in a week. So it's not unreasonable to me for you to say, I don't remember. And you saying, I don't back down, I said, well, that is not an unreasonable statement, too. So I said publicly, sure, possibly you didn't back down. I can see that. I see no reason to go through the bullshit of pulling up old emails to prove one thing or the other. It strikes me as stupid and pointless and not important. And I mean, I don't know, you're a Canadian. You might have been doing Canadian things, whatever weird shit you guys get up to there. I have no idea, so maybe you got distracted. So I did say that live, on Twitter. I did say, yeah, you know what? Fine, possibly you didn't back down. As far as me being obsessed with wanting to engage you, I actually hadn't seen hide nor hair of you in 6 or 7 years. I've forgotten about you until somebody retweeted that tweet and we brought that up. And yeah, it definitely was initially, the conversation was about masks. It was about actually COVID and masks and what is happening in the world. But if you want to have a discussion along with that on an epistemic nature, yeah, I guess we could do that. I have no problem. Like, wow, I did not see that coming. You were going to bring that up. You totally caught me there. So, yeah, we could do that if you want.
But just a point of order, you guys were, to get it out of the way, Sai, you did have a tweet where it was kind of confusing about your position on opening of churches, whether they should have masks, whether they should open at all. I think you guys should address that before you move into anything epistemically, don't you?
Yeah, there was another tweet as well.
No, but the thing is, I have those conversations internally among believers. I don't mind expressing my view to the public, but that has nothing to do with Phil. This has to do with him saying that I backed down from engagements. Now, thankfully, he's retracted that, well, to some degree. I mean, people could watch, see that he's not really retracting. He's kind of sort of retracting it. He says he doesn't want to go into history to look for old emails. The internet is forever. Things that are out there forever. If we've had this exchange, surely he could find evidence of it. I suspect that he can't. The only one that he could remember, he actually realized that it wasn't me. So of the two of us, the only one who was evidentially having a faulty memory, it's him, and it's not me. So So as far as masks go, like I say, I don't mind having this discussion with you at some point, Steve. But with this fellow, I didn't say he was obsessed with me, but he does seem to be trolling me on Twitter. And the thing is, he's misrepresenting me. He's lying about what I say. He's lying about having backed down from him. So I have very few rules as to who I block on things like Twitter. But if somebody blasphemes God, or if they lie about me, those are two pretty good indications of blocking people. I see that, Steve. Anyways, you've been quite good at blocking people who do the same.
Oh yeah, no, I don't judge you for that at all. I do the same thing. Sure. Yeah.
And I think that shortly after this, I'll probably end up blocking Phil for lying about me. But he wanted to have me on, and I don't back down. So I'm more than happy to see why he wanted to have me on prior to this mask thing.
All right.
Because he said this has been going on since 2012. So what does he want to talk about?
All right, Philip, go ahead. What you have him here? So what is your discussion?
Yeah, so I don't understand how you can say you can know anything as far as your world view goes. You can't even tell the difference between a lie and somebody making an assertion based on their knowledge and experience. That statement I made was based on my knowledge and experience at the time. Now you say you didn't back down. I have no problem accepting that. But the fact that you can't tell the difference between a lie and somebody making a statement based on experience, I mean that's troubling.
Well, you're uttering a falsehood.
Oh really?
That's not fair. Yes.
How is it a falsehood?
You uttered a falsehood about me being in Salt Lake City. Is that not fair?
That actually, yes, I was wrong about, but that has nothing to do with the issue of you backing down. At that point, you're doing a poisoning the well fallacy by bringing that up, and you're trying to insinuate that by me saying that you were there when I was incorrect, and I actually checked it. I was like, yes, it wasn't you, it was some other guy, and I'm thankful it wasn't you because that guy was weird as fuck.
You uttered a falsehood.
Okay, so what does that have to do with the other statement I said?
What other statement?
And that's not a falsehood. I mean, that's a falsehood. That's not a lie. That's a falsehood. That was me getting information improperly. So that's not a lie. No, it's not semantics.
Sure it is.
A lie is an intentional attempt to deceive. There was no intent to deceive there. That was just me getting information wrong. And the fact that you can't tell the difference between those two,
give him a little bit of principle of charity. It was a misunderstanding. He corrected it. I wouldn't say it's a lie, but it definitely is.
Well, no, but the thing is, he utters other things on Twitter as well about my position that are
like
clearly
what?
false. He fabricates things. Well, I'm not going to go to Twitter right now. I could do that if you want. But
all right.
With this discussion, I just want to know. I mean,
that would be good to do, by the way.
You've been wanting to talk to me for 8 years. What do you want to talk about?
Well, I haven't actually been wanting to talk to you for 8 years. Like I said, I forgot about you for a good 6 years, and then this came up. Now, what I wanted to discuss was your position on masks and the things you were saying, because you were being kind of coy and just like 1 foot in the pool and playing at the whole anti-mask thing. You even linked that one video, Truth in Media, and as a response to one of my statements about the efficiency of the efficacy of masks. And that video, like I watched 1 minute of it, and it starts out with a false equivocation on the politicizing of COVID, and then it goes straight into a statistical fallacy in misrepresenting the statistics presented in the study and how that applies to the current situation and people using masks as in the general public, not doctors or nurse practitioners. And that I found troubling, that you would just link that casually, which shows you're not even aware of what you're linking. You're not even like using your reason to look at it.
Okay, Phil, you cite logic, you cite reason. Now my question to you is, on what basis do you trust the cognitive faculties you're using to determine that anything is logically fallacious? On what basis do you trust the validity of your cognitive faculties?
Okay, so are you basically now switching into a discussion on propositional knowledge as opposed to procedural or acquaintance knowledge? Because that seems like you're doing.
What part of my question do you not understand?
I'm asking you if that's what you're doing. If we're having an epistemic discussion on knowledge.
No, I'm asking you, you make a lot of claims about logic, about knowledge. I'm asking you on what basis you trust the validity of your cognitive faculties.
All right, so from a procedural or acquaintance knowledge basis, I trust it based on the evidence that I have gathered, the competency from the experience I've had, and the learning.
Okay, in that process, you employ your cognitive faculties.
Yes.
On what basis, then, do you trust the validity of the cognitive faculties you're using when you do that?
See, this sounds to me like you're shifting the goalpost to an epistemic propositional knowledge debate. You keep asking that question over and over again.
Well,
What we normally do, let me finish. What everybody does in life is that they use essentially their five senses, they use their reasoning ability to examine the world around them, to take in data and information, and they come to conclusions based on that. That's how everybody operates, regardless. And that's what I do, and I base my trust of what I do, my cognitive faculties, as you put it, on the results I get.
right.
And so far the results have been fairly good, not always, but most of the time.
But in obtaining those results, you are trusting your cognitive faculties. Is that not correct?
Yes, it is.
On what basis?
I just answered that question.
You answered viciously circular. You're
No, it's actually a virtuously circular.
Okay. On what
What
basis?
you're doing is a what you're doing is a vicious inquiry of that right now.
Okay, on what basis do you first trust the validity of your cognitive faculties when you first enter into the process of validating them? On what basis do you first trust them?
I already answered this question.
Oh,
You're just rewording the question a different way.
right.
Do you know what a PID loop is?
Listen,
I asked you a question. I'm asking.
I realize that.
But do you know what a PID loop is?
I'm asking you to justify the validity of your cognitive faculties.
Yeah, and I'm trying to answer that. I'm trying to answer your question in the way that you might understand it. That's why I'm asking if you know what a PID loop is. You should know this.
All you've given me is a vicious circle.
So you're not going to answer the question on what you know
I'll
what a
answer.
PID loop is.
Just sleeps fast under the west, therefore the much.
Okay, so in other words, you don't know what a PID loop is. You were in boiler controls, right? That was your position. You're in boiler controls.
What is wrong with my answer? How is that a non-answer?
It's a simple yes or no question.
How is
You
that
either
a
know
non-answer?
it or you don't.
Penguin.
Okay, so a PID loop, for those who don't know, this is a proportional integral derivative loop, which is used in controllers. Now, I asked you this question because you're a boiler operator, right? So you should actually know this according to your own logic, that you have to know essentially the core of everything you know. Because that's kind of what you're implying here, that you have to know the original position from which everything starts right up to the line of your reasoning, up to the very point where you're making a decision on something. So as a boiler operator, you are doing your job without full knowledge of how the operation works. So I'd ask you, how the hell could you do your job not knowing that simple question?
Listen, all you've given me is a viciously circular answer. I'm just asking you how you justify the validity of your cognitive faculties, and you say you use them to justify them. That's a vicious circle.
So why don't you explain to us what a viciously circular answer is?
Assuming what is to be proven in the proof.
Okay, what is a virtuous circular?
Listen, this is a conversation that I have with people who can justify intelligibility. You can't. So, Steve, if you want to open it up at this point, I'm happy to, because I think that we've
well, at this point, look, at this point, you're just saying the same thing over and over again when I'm giving
right.
you an answer.
The
answer I'm giving you is reasonably justifiable. You are jumping back and forth between procedural and propositional knowledge. That's what you're doing. You're trying to use the latter in order to use it as a sledgehammer to basically just whack away any answer or any virtuous inquiry. That's what you're doing here. And it's what you've been doing for 10 years, obviously, because you haven't changed your style in all that time.
Are you saying that you are not employing your reason to justify the validity of your reasoning? All right, Steve.
All right. We're actually not done. I was going to ask you now. In the Twitter exchange we had, we were talking about COVID and masks, and you brought up the issue of what is the cause for this, cause versus reason. So why did you do that?
Pizza sleeps fast under the west, therefore the much.
So giving gibberish is okay.
Well,
let me ask you the question now. Steve, did you understand what he said? Was that
No, but what he's trying to do, there's something okay, have you ever heard of color screening idea, sleep furiously?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's basically, that. He's just basically,
I'm aware of that. The fact that you're aware of that, and the fact that you're aware of that shows that he's just a
No, there's no Chomsky actually that said that, but yeah.
Yeah.
This is his variant of that.
I know it is. I'm aware of what he's doing.
Okay.
And my point is that essentially he's trying to do gibberish language in order to show that reasoning, like reasoning processes don't work. But the fact that everybody in the chat here obviously understands what he's doing, you understand what he's doing, shows a flaw in that thinking, and it shows it's stupid.
Well, it is kind of an obfuscation. I mean, these
You're
are
all created in the image of God. That's why you know that that's why you know that.
Thank you. No, okay, this is something useful. Okay, repeat what you said because we were talking over you.
I said you're all created in the image of God. That's why you know what I said is gibberish. But I can justify it as gibberish. You can't.
Okay, so
How?
what is your reason for justifying that? Essentially, you're saying our knowledge comes from God.
Pizza sleeps fast under the west, therefore the munch.
See, this is what I was saying when I said you're just going to duck and you're going to avoid.
How is that avoiding? On what basis is that an avoid?
This is getting circular. Let me read the super chats real quick, and then I can try to guide it a little bit. Okay, so Helios says, Saya is going to go straight to his, if you don't believe in God, you have no ability to know anything until you prove that, I won't engage you for $5. That, I think he's pretty much right on that, don't you think, Saya? That kind of seems what you're doing. I mean,
No, that's fair. I just recently had a conversation with your friendly neighborhood agent. It was a wonderful conversation.
I know. Sure.
He was not trolling me on Twitter. He was not saying that I was backing down from anything. This is a different story with Phil. He's saying that I'm trolling him, saying that I'm backing down from him, so I'm going to have him stick with his epistemology, and I can expose it for the folly that it is.
All right, well, let me read this other one.
We've already showed that not to be true.
Well, let me say something.
I'm sorry, but he's basing his attitude in this
Okay,
on falsehood.
Let me interject. Let me finish the super chats real quick. But I have an interjection for both of you. God's Auditor says for $5, Phil, quote, let's talk about mass, guys. Okay, sounds good. So on the subject of presuppositionalism, okay, so let me do this real quick. I'm not going to get, people were asking me to kind of explain it. I'm not going to get into that right now because you guys are heavy in the dialogue. But I will say this, at least for this session or whatever, give each other a little bit of principle of charity, a little bit of cooperative principle that you guys are both interlocutors are coming in to have a discussion and both still want to have a rational discourse.
Well, that's been my
I get it. Let's just set aside any preconceived notions of what happened prior coming in of who's going to be dishonest or who's lied or who's misrepresented. It doesn't really matter. We're having a discussion now. Just for the sake of this discussion, just let him ask his questions and maybe try to answer them with honest discourse.
I'm not going to grant him the tools of Jesus Christ to argue against Jesus Christ. I refuse to do that.
But you need Jesus to have an honest and
My work is going to allow that.
If this is a real conversation, what I would do at this point is I would actually do an inquiry into your statement about what you said, where in order to have knowledge, essentially you were saying what you have, in order to have knowledge, it has to come from God, because that's actually something that can be addressed. But if you're just going to obfuscate, there's no point in continuing.
Steve,
You understand?
no way.
When I answer as I do, you have to have the basis for saying that what I'm saying is nonsensical. And that's what I'm asking. If you can't provide that basis, then you can't say that what I'm saying is nonsensical, but you insist that it is, because you have an absolute standard that you cannot justify without God. That's my point.
Okay, so if that's your point, can we address that instead of you being silly? Because that's what you've been doing.
When you address it and you appeal to absolute laws of logic, on what basis do you assume that your cognitive faculties are operating properly when you do that?
Okay, actually, that wasn't what I was going to address. I was going to ask
Of course
you.
not, because you can't answer it.
Well, I would like to get to that after I addressed your initial statement. It's just you're jumping ahead. You're putting the cart before the horse here. So your statement is that in order to know anything, it has to come from God. So you believe in special revelation, that you have to accept Jesus in order to know anything. Is that correct? Is that a reasonable summation of what you're saying?
Pizza sleeps fast under the west, therefore the month.
If you're going to obfuscate, then we can't have a
How is
conversation.
that obfuscation? On what basis? What is your absolute standard of logic and reason by which you call that obfuscation? You have to get there. You can't get there without God.
Yeah, we actually can get there without you saying that. That's just you not wanting to answer the question.
We can talk about mass or anything, but you have to justify your ability to do so.
Okay, so you're not going to answer the question of whether or not in order to know anything. No, you actually didn't. You obfuscated. Yeah.
Based on what standard?
If you can answer the question, we can have a conversation.
I did answer the question.
Do you? No, you didn't. Special revelation, general revelation.
What do
you need in order to get the answer from God?
Pizza sleeps fast under the west, therefore the munch.
Steve, I think we're done with this part of the conversation. I mean, if you want to move on, and have a conversation about masks or COVID-19.
I don't think there's been a conversation so far. This is not a conversation.
It's been a joke, and this is why I didn't really want to do this. I said I'd do it because I agreed to do it, but in the end run, I've seen what Sai's done, and he does this stuff, and it's silly. And this is the thing that's frustrating. Like, I have no actual problem with Christian presuppositionalism in the sense of, if that's what you want to have for your belief, that's fine, man. You do whatever you want. It's when you start making claims and demands on other people's that I have a problem, or when you do this kind of vicious crap where you have this kind of argumentation. It's the short bus version of philosophy. The only way I
assume this. Look, okay, so you guys both agree with a vicious circularity, right? I mean, I was right. If you could derive a conclusion from a single premise, it's a circular argument, right? You're begging the question.
Yeah, I have no problem with the argument.
Okay,
I have a problem defining it as virtuous versus vicious, but I personally think it's vicious and is defining it. And it is an act.
Okay, well, let's talk about the vicious one real quick, and this isn't exactly probably the best argument, but the way Say argues this, he'll try to explain or ask you, like, how do you use your reason without using your reason, right? That's something a side would actually ask, which is actually basically saying, how do you do a push-up without using your arms? You can't. You have to use reason as the foundation to even begin to use your reason. What Sai does is he puts God ahead of that. He says God is the foundation for everything.
I get that.
Right. So all you have to do is, well, hang on.
That's the problem.
Right, but all you have to do is say, I don't need God as my foundation. I'm using reason. I'm presupposing reason, right? I mean, you're taking it axiomatically, classical foundationism or whatever. But you're just taking it as a probably basic belief, or Wittgenstein would probably call them hinge beliefs. But you just say, look, I'm assuming my reason, my faculties work right now for the sake of this argument. Let's just go with it. There you go.
Which I said that 15 minutes ago, but he didn't want to accept it.
Do you accept that he uses a reason to use? He uses his reason for reasoning. It's not a justification.
I said that's the basic principle.
You can't justify that, but
that's why I brought up his using the cause versus reason on Twitter.
Okay.
Because I was going to make the point that even in examining cause, you're using your reason to do that.
Would you admit that there are people who have faulty reasoning?
Of course.
How do you know you're not one of those people?
How I operate in daily life, and whether or not I'm conflicting with the majority of society and having issues.
So you use your reason to make that determination?
Of course, just like you have to use your reason to make your determinations. We're both in the same boat there.
It's a
like
vicious circle.
Well, actually, I think it's a virtuous circle.
No, you're reasoning.
Because I'm not interjecting additional propaganda and bullshit into it like you do. And I'm sorry, I don't want to call let me just rephrase that. In the sense that just because you're using God, I'm not saying it's bullshit. I'm just saying the crap that you're doing right now is bullshit.
Well, the thing is,
like, if you want to accept God as like the source of your reason and intelligence, and I'm like, okay, fine. My attitude is it's possible, but I see no evidence for that. It could just as easily be another source. It could be organic. We don't necessarily know, and we might never know.
So you live on blind faith?
No, I live on the faith in my reasoning processes that which is not blind.
Which you cannot justify.
So you can justify yours. I'm just curious.
If you want to say that your belief is properly basic, that your belief in the validity of your reasoning, anybody with invalid reason could say the same thing. And it would logically follow that a person with invalid reason could not know that there's such a person, because you would need valid reason in order to determine that you're a person with invalid reasoning. So if you were such a person with invalid reason, you could never know it. And since you admitted that there are such people, you don't have an escape from that, sir. I do.
Yeah, but you don't actually have an escape, because you're using the same reasoning, processes, the same five senses in order to process the information you're getting from God. So you're actually in the same boat that I am. The only difference is that you're adding the addition of your biblical text as a source of your reason. So that's basically, it's vicious, because even if your biblical text contradicts what you're directly observing, then your choice is to, hey, Alexa, shut the fuck up. So, sorry about that. So, if you're...
Alexis wanted.
That's the best interjection in the entire debate. Holy shit.
Yeah, Alexis wants to
You know what she's saying? She's saying she's reminding me to take your fucking supplements, but she won't take fucking supplements. Alexa, stop. So, what the hell is it? Oh, yeah, I was saying, so you're basically in the same boat. The only difference is that you're adding the layer of the Bible in that, and it becomes vicious when it's in direct conflict with what you're observing in the world. So, and the two of them don't meet, they don't mesh.
How do you know that your reasoning about me being in the same boat is valid?
We already went through this. You're going to keep repeating the same question because you're going to try to make it look like there's some weakness there. But we've already had this statement dealt with. We dealt with it 15 minutes ago. You just keep repeating it because you think it's scoring you some kind of showmanship points. But it's getting boring, frankly.
Well, the thing is, I'm not going to move on from a point that you can't answer.
I've already answered it, though.
Other people will be, might be happy to do that. I won't.
Yeah, I know, because you want to be a dick. I get that. I'm sorry, but that's what's going on here.
Hang on. So do you think Phil can actually use reason? Do you think he's capable of having actual reason?
In the hands of God, of course he can.
Okay. And you can presuppose that. That's completely your right to presuppose that. But
Well, thank you. Very kind of you.
You just answered my other question.
Principle of charity.
You literally just answered my other question without intending.
How
So
do you do that?
you're saying that general revelation is how we get our reason from God, right? So that right there, that just makes the automatic assumption, well, if you need general revelation to get your reason from God, then you don't need to accept Jesus Christ as your Savior, because you don't need that divine revelation, so who cares?
All I'm saying that according to my worldview, you have a basis for justifiability of your reasoning. Not according to yours. I can justify your ability to reason. You can't. That's all I'm saying.
I'm taking it at this point that when you say that, when I say something like I just said, that is you acknowledging that you can't answer that question. Because that's how it's coming across to me.
Well, Helios he actually just kind of asked this question, so maybe Sai can address it, because I already know the answer. But Helios again says, Sai, how do you know that your reason isn't faulty? How do you know that you are not the one who is gibbering in some padded room? This line of questioning is pointless because it is impossible to disprove. So how do you know that your reasoning is correct?
For somebody other than Phil, I have no problem answering that. I have revelational epistemology. Everything that I know is either by or through revelation from God.
The Word of God. The Word of God, right? The Bible.
God reveals things to us such that we can know them for sure.
And you believe that's the Bible, right?
You just contradicting yourself.
He reveals it through his Bible, through nature, innately. He reveals
You're contradicting yourself. You just said you only need general revelation. And now you're saying you need special revelation in order to know. So that's a contradiction. Well, you didn't. When I said it, you didn't say anything in response to it. So it's one or the other. If it's special revelation, then just by examining the world around you, just by interacting with other people, we know that can't be the case. Because there's a lot of non-Christians out there. There's Muslims, there's Jews, there's Hindus, and they're moving through the world and doing fine without this special revelation from God and Jesus. So right there, we know that your point of view doesn't work. Like if you went with general revelation, I'd be like, yeah, sure, I have no problem with that as far as you can make a reasonable argument for it. But for special revelation, it just falls apart.
How do you know that your reasoning about that is valid?
Thank you for acknowledging the point.
Well, let's clarify that. So Sai, you are saying that, like Helios' question, you are saying that the reason why you don't think you're the one that has faculties that are impaired, that is because God is letting you know that is not the case through His Word somehow. Is that correct?
I would say that God justifies our ability to reason to rational conclusions. All of us.
Okay, but if that was the case, that you were the one that was in a padded room, you were having delusions, would God let you know this?
I believe He lets us know that we're not such people.
Okay. What about the people who are?
I can't speak for them.
Okay, even if they're Christians and they've accepted Christ, how does God let them know they're
I cannot speak for
them? Okay. So Superstore Energy says $5. How does I know God isn't sending deceitful spirits to him like He did to the people in the Old Testament, which did happen. I think He sent dreams to people. Like, how do you know God isn't sending deceitful spirits to you?
That He never did it to His elect.
Okay, so the Calvinist elect He never did it to. Okay.
There's only one kind, man.
Okay. Yeah, by the way, it's so off topic, but it's so interesting that every Calvinist I ever met, except for one, has prayed about being elected. They've all gotten the answer they're elected, except for one. He's like, I prayed and God said I was reprobate. I'm like, that's interesting. It doesn't happen very often, right? They all seem to be elect. Okay.
I would deny that fellow's revelation.
I actually like Calvinism as an idea. It's like the idea that, there's only so many people who are elect, and you're just working on the assumption, well, I'm one of them, or I'm not, so I'm just going to do what I'm going to do and hope for the best. That's there's kind of like a dark kind of attitude there that I can appreciate as a Jew, so.
Hey, you want to bite people?
Yeah, that's that. Yeah.
Well,
yeah. Hey.
I'll make some matzo bra. You know, have some gefilte fish. Good for Story Street. Atheist Language for $10 says any supposed revelation you could possibly have, divine or otherwise, is inevitably going to be filtered through your senses that you just have to assume are trustworthy. No God can change that. That's what we would call what's called sense data, right?
Yeah.
So as we perceive the world, we filter it through sense data that only is subjective of us, right? We can't experience somebody else's sense data, right?
Yeah, I was trying to get there.
Okay. So I mean, he's right on it.
That's begging the question. That's begging the question that God cannot use our sense and reasoning to reveal things to us. Certainly, that's just begging the question.
No, that's you appealing to divine revelation again. I mean, to special revelation again. I'm sorry, but every time you say that you need God, that you need to accept God.
Is it impossible for God to use our sense and reasoning to reveal things to us? Certainly.
Are you asking the person in the chat, or you're asking me? I'm not clear.
Well, I can't talk to the person in the chat.
Please ask him.
Well, you actually are. They're hearing you, and they're responding. And
I'm talking to you. You made
okay.
a statement, and I responded to your statement with a question.
Okay, if God wanted to, yeah, sure. It's in the Bible. I mean, I'm sorry, it's in the Tanakh. He actually does that at one point. He misleads one of the kings in his mind so that to convince him to do an attack.
But you're convinced that God is not...
Hell, in the early portion of the Tanakh, there's a whole series of stories with Abraham and his wife where they're where they're traveling and essentially God is tricking the kings of countries into going after Abraham's wife, and then when they do it, God shows up, or rather Abraham, representing God, is just like, hey, God's here, he's going to screw you up. We're doing that. It's like a whole line of thing. It's a really fun storyline to read. So yeah, I mean it's in the Tanakh.
But you're just going to say that you're convinced God has told you otherwise, that it's not the case, right, Si?
Sorry, has told me what?
That you're not suffering from delusions. God is not sending you delusional spirits.
Well, according to Scripture, I can know whether I'm saved, and He does not do that to His elect. That's what Scripture teaches us.
What is it in Scripture that?
So in other words, you can't know anything unless you have special revelation. I'm sorry, that's just.
That would be special, not general.
Yeah, that's an.
If God's giving you special knowledge that you are not delusion, that's not general, though.
Well, you can make that claim, Phil, but then I ask you, how do you know anything? How do you know anything to be true? A necessary element of knowledge is truth. And I would ask you to define truth. What is truth, according to your world?
So, if I was a believer, like you are, I would go to the root of general revelation. Well, I'm answering the question in the context of what we're talking about. If from general revelation, I would be like, well, we have the ability to know because God gave it to us, and whether or not we don't, that depends on our reasoning, whether it was faulty. But from a believer point of view, that's how I would do it. I would use God as the original source. I would never go special revelation because that's just crazy talk to me. I'm sorry, but it's just like you just look at the world around you, interact with people, and you can see that can't be the case. The only way that can be true is if you start sliding into solipsism, and at that point you're doing a solipsistic panic because you don't want to deal with the idea that we can use reason. And that's what you're doing at that point when you do divine special revelation.
Okay, what is truth according to your worldview?
Are you talking epistemically or you're talking general knowledge? I'm going to answer general knowledge. I'm not going to ask you because you're not going to say whatever.
Define truth.
From a general knowledge perspective, truth is that which I examine and the evidence shows me that it has the appearance of truth.
Okay, so truth is that which corresponds to reality. Is that fair?
Yes.
How do you know what's real?
We already went through this.
Right.
The first 15 minutes. Now you're just coming back.
Right.
If you want to drop out and Steve and I can have a conversation.
Hey, look, I tend to...
we can do that, but it's like, apparently you're not here to actually have a virtuous...
I tend to deflationary theories. He's talking about correspondence theory, and I tend to deflationary theories where there's no truth maker. So it has nothing to do with reality. So we probably don't have the same version of what true is, because there's...
I mean, I knew
true means
I knew
nothing in deflationary theory, right? So, yeah.
I mean, I watched the interview with you and Matt. I saw what you did there. Like, that led up to the interview with Matt, where he was having a conversation with Matt this is Dr. Matt Hunt on Twitter, and they were discussing, I believe it was masks and COVID-19.
Well, okay, let's ask
and he pulled, the point here is that I'm saying is he pulled him into an interview with the other guy, the TDS guy, and he proceeded to immediately hit him with this. And I'm watching it, and I'm just like, how do you even consider this a victory? You know, I mean, is this what you do? You basically pull unsuspecting people into a conversation so they're unprepared to have a discussion about worldview. It's like, you know, really good, great. You know, you beat somebody who's unprepared. That's a real skill.
Are you saying that you're unsuspecting?
No, I'm saying he was. So I was prepared, but I also knew that
I've been asking him a question about worldview for 3 years. You can look at our Twitter feed. It's still up there.
You've been asking it longer than that, haven't you? Since you weren't doing this since 2010?
I've been asking him the question since he started trolling me about 3 years ago. I can only find evidence that
he was asking it for 3 years, but the conversation you went into wasn't one expecting that he was going to be dealing with. Now, granted, I will give you caveat that after 3 years of him engaging you, he probably should have been prepared for it. But at the same time, it would have been generous of you to say, okay, let's do a conversation. And by the way, as we're going to discuss worldview. You didn't do that.
Hang on.
But listen, I looked at your.
Steve, I'm sorry.
I looked at your YouTube channel, and you are pro-abortion. So it makes no sense for me to have a conversation with you about masks, since you think that masks are just protecting an advanced clump of cells, which you have no problem killing. So
do you want to discuss abortion?
No. I'm saying it makes no sense to argue over the protection of.
That's kind of poisoning the well, though. It has
No. Well, we're talking about masks. According to his atheistic worldview, we're just advanced clumps of cells. And at some point, he says we can kill them, and now he's saying we should protect them with masks. It doesn't make any sense.
No, you forgot I'm a Jew and I'm an agnostic. So I'm like, I told you like 3 times on Twitter, and you're not paying attention.
On your YouTube channel, you say you're an atheist.
Yeah, my YouTube channel dates back to like 2010. It's like I don't make videos anymore. I made one video to one person like 6 months ago. I don't do YouTube
That's probably a
anymore.
good decision.
There's a little bit of a
By the way, what was the
going
thing
on
that
there,
you found most inane on my channel? I took that as a high compliment coming in. What was the most inane thing on my channel?
The perm.
The perm? Yeah, it was pretty bad. Well, it's not a perm though, it's natural. This is naturally curly hair.
Let's say we can address some things of substance here. Let's say we can redirect here. First of all, Dr. Hunt is not a philosopher. He is a mathematician. He does his specialty, I think, is in what is it? Is it solid state stuff that he does? He's a type of mathematician, right? But applied mathematics, right? But you know. The point is, like, he asked you what truth is, right? And clearly you had a circular argument of what truth is, circular explanation. You can't use truth to say what truth is, right? But does it really matter what he defines as truth? Whether he uses truth makers, truth conditionals, it doesn't matter. He accepts certain things that are reality, right? You accept axiomatically that reality is at least something that we experience. Do you not, Phil?
I'm sorry, this is my bad. I got distracted by the chat. Somebody said Puka is a talented moderator, and I immediately felt bad for Steve because he's actually the moderator. And I was just like, I've got to give Steve.
This is attitude, but I told him this is my fault. We don't have debates here.
Felt like outraged that you know that.
This is not Modern Day Debates channel. This is not.
What did you say?
I love James to death,
that's
but
that's totally on the
yeah, he's a type of moderator. We have discussions here that we try to facilitate. My point being is that. Philip, you have certain things that you hold to be axiomatically the case, like reality exists, right? That you are experiencing something. Why does he need a deity for that? You are assuming that, you're presupposing that, but does it matter to him whether he needs that deity or not? Because to him, he doesn't have that in his foundations, right? That's not one of his basic beliefs, because I don't think God is a properly basic belief. I know Plantinga argues that, but I think it's more basic belief. I don't see anything properly basic about it. But would you agree that he's allowed to have truths? He's allowed to have the assumption that reality exists, and he's experiencing it just merely as an assumption without the need for a God? Why does he have to have a God for that? Or to have God exist for it, whether he accepts it or not?
You're asking me why he has to have that?
Yeah.
Can't make sense of it without God.
Why?
Well, you've heard him. It's a viciously circular argument.
No, it's not.
You're just jumping back on special revelation.
It's just foundation. That's all.
That's right. He has no justification for his foundation.
But the justification is foundationalism. Literally, theory of justification.
Right, that's a vicious circle.
No, it's actually not a vicious circle. It's a gap in knowledge.
So you live on faith.
Reasonable faith.
Yeah, it's a form of faith. Yeah, no, I look, I'm the one that argues atheists have blind faith commitments. I mean, of course they do. They're the ones that for some reason get triggered by that word, right? But they are blind.
That's probably why Aaron Ra loves you so much.
Oh yeah, right?
I understand the difference.
I love Aaron. I really do. I wish he would like wise up and just like suck it up and admit that I'm right and we could be friends again.
So you understand the difference in the word faith between faith as in like belief?
Pistis.
Yeah, thank you. I was gonna go into the whole thing, but essentially, yeah. Essentially, faith as in having reasonable faith in the sense of like that I know my wife is gonna make me dinner.
That's confidence, yeah.
Yeah, it's a confident kind of faith, as opposed to having a faith. Yeah, as opposed to having faith that is like in direct contradiction of either evidence or with absolutely no evidence. Like that, I'm leaning in faith in the first portion there as opposed to the second.
But you have blind faith in your ability to evaluate evidence.
Oh, it's not blind. It's based on my reason.
Yeah, which you have blind faith in.
No, it's not blind, as I just said. I'm not going to go back and forth in this.
The blind faith would be
I answered the question, and that's all there is to it.
Blind faith would be his position that he accepts reality is real. That would be a blind faith thing. That's fine. I got no issue with that.
Which is a
What's his foundation? That's his foundation. Once he's got that, he can start building upon that. Super chat real quick. I am Moon for $5. By the way, we love you.
Do I get a cut?
Yeah, you know what? Beer. We're gonna have a beer. I promise you and I will meet one day. You and other people, I would love that. I am pro-choice and anti-COFEPE. It's not reaching to understand why. Stop with the whataboutisms. She has kind of a point. Look, you can have positions that they're not incongruent with each other, right? I mean, positions that wear a mask have absolutely no relevancy to abortion. I think it is kind of sleazy to kind of mix those two because they're not relevant with each other. Come on.
But the thing is, if it has to do with the sanctity of life and protecting life, then they are related. And I'm not going to take my advice from somebody to protect life for somebody who has no problem with taking life randomly, arbitrarily, murdering.
And yet the pro-life faction in the United States of America has made it very clear they have no problem with sacrificing life as long as they can get the economy back on
I'm not a
the
pro-lifer.
road again.
I'm not a pro-lifer.
However you want to put it. And
I'm an abolitionist.
potato.
Big difference.
You're an abolitionist.
The pro-life movement has been keeping abortion legal in America.
The pro-life
They don't want it
movement has been fighting.
There's a film out there called Babies Are Still Murdered Here, in which I am featured. I urge you to check it out, and it exposes the problems with the pro-life movement.
So what's your position as an abolitionist? I'm curious.
That abortion should be abolished.
Okay, and the pro-life movement in America fights fairly explicitly to have it abolished as well.
No, they have heartbeat bills. They have all sorts of legislation that keeps abortion legal.
Yeah, okay, now you're not understanding a basic principle of how they operate in America.
I know exactly how they operate.
They're doing a chipping away strategy with their ultimate goal of making it abolished.
They are supporting legislation which enshrines in law that abortion remain legal.
Yeah, you're doing like an all or nothing attitude, which
That's what an abolitionist is.
Yeah, I know, but you're doing the whole thing of like we're not going to take any steps together.
Yeah, he literally believes. He believes
that's like purity test shit, which
at the time
on the legislative level.
Well,
might as well be like a Greenpeace, you know.
But let's clarify. So, Sai, you believe, as an abolitionist, you believe there is no justification ever for abortion, right? I don't know how we got on this topic, whatever, but since we're on it for 2
He keeps
seconds.
bringing it up.
Yeah. Well, I know. I know he keeps trying to go to that thing, but
to take innocent life. But I mean, as far as incrementalism, I mean, at the time of the slave trade, I would have been against abortion as well. I would have been an abolitionist then too. If somebody came out with legislation that said anybody darker than this remains a slave and anybody lighter than this is no longer a slave, I would be against that legislation because that would dehumanize those people who were darker. And I will not do that.
So you wouldn't legislatively agree to a bill that would actually increase the rights of slaves in the process of trying to get
how are we going to get to this topic? I don't know.
Yeah.
Like
because he keeps bringing up random topics like this.
I
think we should actually
pick a lane here, guys.
And you're basically wrong on that topic. We can get into it. I have no problem with it.
God Louder for $2 says, as a deist, God told me he wasn't Jesus. By the way, how did you know? I am Moon 5 more says, no offense, you have no right to speak on women's rights, so go back to talking your stuff about other things. Well, I love Moon a lot, but I do think that anybody's right.
How dare she assume my gender? How dare she?
I think it's awesome when you get three older white dudes.
Right. You know what? I got no problem with that. Look, I will disagree with on this. We're allowed to do that.
How dare you assume my gender and color?
I've got
I think
I've had like
I think
I've had three. I'm sorry.
I think the fact that the whole point of having freedoms is that it doesn't matter if you have women or men, what gender, you're having a discussion. It doesn't matter who the participants are. Now, granted, if you were advocating a certain position, I do think you should have a cross-section if all possible. We're not advocating in positions here, so we don't need a representative sample. But I do want to put a special shout-out to Nadia Yvette Chambers, who's in the audience. I don't know if Cy remembers her, but if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have a YouTube channel, so it's really good to see her. She was the first hangout that I think I've ever went in on YouTube. So.
Did you see my abortion debate in Oklahoma, Steve?
I don't think so.
The T-shirt that I had made for it, my plantation, my choice, with a couple of arms and shackles. That's the argument that he's presenting, or that the person is presenting.
I don't see how that works.
My body, my choice, my plantation, my choice.
But they were slaves. They didn't have a choice.
Neither does the baby in the womb.
But you're presupposing that the baby should be out.
Yeah, you're making it into a personhood, right? Which the law has established.
You basically are taking a faith-based belief position that the fetus is the equivalent of a fully person, and you are entitled to that opinion and that faith-based belief. But that's yours. There's a lot of people out there don't have it. The Jews, for example, don't have that position. So you're basically trying to force your particular religious bent and belief on this on, for example, Jewish people.
Now, we
don't care for.
Being a Jew, do you know why Nazis were allowed to kill Jews in the Second World War?
Why do we?
God.
Because anti-abortionists always have to try to bring
because they were deemed to be subhuman. They were deemed to be subhuman. That's why slaves were allowed to be kept as well, because they were deemed to be subhuman. They didn't have rights. You're doing the same thing to the unborn.
Yeah, but I'm not, because you can look at the characteristics of a fetus and a fully born person, and you can.
Okay, let me ask you a question. At what month do you think that abortion should no longer be allowed?
Me?
Yeah.
I'm for just to have it as it's between the doctor and the patient. I have trust in doctors and patients to make decisions for their needs when it comes to, their physical and mental well-being. Now, keep in mind that an abortion is not an abortion after a certain point. When you say what month, you're going to hit about 6-7 months, and at that point, you're not doing an abortion. You're actually doing a C-section.
Okay, so
it's an early birth.
But you're saying that prior to 6 months that it should be allowed if the doctor and the patient agree on it.
If the doctor and the patient agree that it is medically necessary, then yes.
No, not medically necessary. Just because most of them are not medically necessary.
According to you, but not according to them.
No, actually, I have anecdotal evidence of a friend of mine who's been sitting outside an abortion clinic in Orlando for almost 9 years, and he talked to the women out there.
On the subway. Not even.
Well, no, this is experiential. His name is John Barrows. It's outside the Orlando Women's Center. Anybody can check that out. And he talks to these women, and they are not getting rid of these children for medical reasons. So you're saying that only medical reasons should allow an abortion prior to
medical includes both physical, physiological, and psychological. So he is actually saying that he does not find their reasons for doing it justifiable under that. That's on him.
So it should be allowed.
I also have a friend, by the way, who works at an abortion clinic as an escort, and in his experience of doing it for 5 years in Badger, he has a channel with videos anymore. He does it in DC. Every woman who comes in there, they're doing it out of necessity.
Should it be disallowed for convenience then? They just don't want another child.
I think it's not for us to speak on whether or not it's a matter of convenience. I think at that point you're putting your own preconceptions about the person on them.
If they state that it's a matter of convenience, are you saying it should not be allowed?
If they state it's a matter of convenience?
Yeah, they can't afford it, convenience, whatever. Not medically necessary.
I'm not aware of that really being an issue, and this gets
Okay,
so this gets into a case of law where when you have a law that allows for this that kind of thing to happen, and it's in such a small minority, then legally that's going to happen. You're going to have cases like that. If you're going to legislate according to the exception, then you're going to have bad legislation, and that is proven demonstrably across every area of the legal system.
Okay, let me give you
it all the time.
Let me give you a scenario. A poor couple. They really can't afford to have children, but this woman sees that if she has a disabled child, that she'll get benefits from the government. So she asked the doctor at 2 months to surgically remove her baby's legs, so that when the baby is born, it will have no legs and she'll get benefits. Should that be allowed?
This is a ridiculous argument.
Should it be allowed?
It doesn't happen.
Well, hang on.
I'm sorry, but I'm not going
Well, hang on,
to discuss legislation.
Hang on, I got.
It just don't happen.
Hang on. It's a hypothetical, right? And by the way.
Yeah, but it's a stupid hypothetical. I'm sorry, but it is. It's like it's literally never going to happen. So why is it coming up?
Okay, but you criticize Cy for not answering hypothetical questions and things like that. I mean, I get he doesn't, by the way, but I mean, it's a fair hypothetical to ask whether it happens once or never. It's still what if, and I have no problem with those types of questions. But hang on one second. I am Moon for $10 says. Let me clarify. Men can speak on human rights. However, if it's a woman's rights issue, it would be better to have a woman in discussion. A woman's rights issue should have a woman present if they're advocating for certain positions, but not necessarily. Look, I can advocate for women's rights, and I don't have to have a uterus to do so, right? That's a genetic fallacy. Where the argument comes from makes no difference. But I think to have a representative sample, right?
You can be a woman without a uterus.
See, Steve, I want to
Gender
excuse
speaking,
that
sure.
with the issue of what if, like hypotheticals.
Yeah,
I have no problem with discussing hypotheticals and what ifs, but when it comes to legislation, I do have a problem with discussing what ifs because we've had so much legislation passed on the basis of a what if that was unproven.
Okay.
Like look at the student debt crisis. The entire student debt, and I know this is getting uphill, but it's a great example. The entire student debt crisis came about because when they first started doing government loans for student debt stuff back in the 60s, it was the entire process for how they dealt with that debt was based on the hypothetical. Well, what if somebody goes to school and
Absolutely.
it didn't happen.
But he's not asking you to make policy on it, right? He wasn't asking you to just change the laws. No, I don't think he was. But
that's actually
so
that's the end game.
Okay, so Cy, you're in the position that at conception life occurs, and at that point it's sanctified, right? That's right. Okay. So would you agree that at that point, let's say you have a very simple gamete, right? It's just a cell. It hasn't even split yet. So it's not human by definition. Humans are multicellular. Would you agree? I mean, categorically speaking. Right.
I would say at conception, that is a life that deserves protection.
But it's not a human at that point, right? Because it's a cell.
What is it?
It's something that could be a human. A seed is not.
When does it become human? Is it a dolphin?
Hang on. It's a potential. It has potentiality, right? A seed is not a tree, right? A seed has the potential to become a tree, but a seed is not a tree.
What kind of seed?
A tree seed.
A tree seed?
Yeah.
What kind of tree seed?
Acorn, apple seed. There's a potential, right? There's potentiality there. So there's a human embryo that will be developed at a certain point, which is a human embryo. It does not necessarily human. Well, again, and it goes into biological and it goes into legal things. But a cell, just a fertilized cell, I can never see an argument that anybody would ever call that human because humans, as Aaron Rod will tell you, is chemoheliotropic, has an internal digestive system, multicellular. I mean, even Aaron, that's his shtick, right? Even though
but I don't leave it to unbelievers to declare to me what is a human.
Rabbit hole fallacy.
So God is telling you that a fertilized cell is something in the Bible they knew what that was.
Rabbit hole fallacy is to say
I would
something
say
that you would have to go into other subjects in order to, and then what about
Hold it. How can you make that statement?
exponentially more and more until
Essentially, the 1800s, the attitude scripturally from both
thousands of rabbit
and the
holes.
Jewish perspective was that it wasn't actually human being until, respectively, for Muslims, I believe, it's 3 months for boys, 6 months for girls. Christians, it was around 6 months. And Jews, they're like, until it actually comes out of the womb, it's not a human being. And you're sitting here saying you can scripturally justify that? I just don't see that. As plausible.
So are you saying that the woman should be allowed to have the legs of her child surgically removed at 2 months?
No, I asked you a question on how you justify that given the history of
You didn't answer my question.
You didn't answer mine.
I asked yours first.
No, you actually didn't. I asked you how you justify that. Oh, you mean the hypothetical you did back there?
Right.
You mean the hypothetical that you did back there?
Right, at 2 months.
At 2 months. At 2 months, kind of. Well.
So where are the Bible?
My problem is I'm trying to picture this surgically if it can even be done, and I can't.
Well,
it's like this is again getting into the case of like, would it be allowed? No, I don't think a doctor would allow that. If you could find a doctor who would do it, but I can't.
They do. No, they do it. That's partial birth abortion.
How 2 months? At 2 months?
Oh, they do it up to 8 months, 9 months.
No, he's talking about at 2 months going and surgically remove the legs off a baby just arbitrarily so then they can go on handicap. That's what.
That's what he's asking.
Yeah, which is just like such an implausible hypothetical.
Yeah, that's a little bit.
It's like why address it?
Yeah,
that's my attitude, especially when we're talking about passing legislation. I'm sorry, that's just ridiculous.
Of course it's ridiculous. That's why you want to address it, because it exposes the absurdity of your worldview.
No, it actually doesn't.
Why?
Because it can't be done. Can you even do that surgically? I'm not a doctor. I don't even know if they can do that surgically technically. If you can even get a doctor to agree to it.
But I think he would agree that we, no ethical doctor would ever do such a thing, right?
Yeah.
Why not? They'd kill it, but they wouldn't take the legs off.
But yeah, that's because you're dealing with something that's a potential life at that point.
Yeah.
It's not actually a human being at its potential life. So you've got the inevitability that it's going to be born, assuming it survives the process and makes it all the way through. It will eventually be a human being who is handicapped by force.
Yeah.
You can laugh, but that's exactly the argument.
You can take the legs off, but you can't. So you can kill it, but you can't take the legs off.
Yeah, but you see, but now you're getting into the issue. You're getting into the issue of the potential life versus existing human life, and you're talking about it actually in the context of the United States of America, a country where it's been been made very clear over and over again that human life has very little value.
You can harm
Right.
it, but
So
you
yeah,
can
that's
kill it, but
a
you can't harm
fact.
it. You can kill it, but you can't harm it.
Well, they can kill grandma.
Good
They
argument.
can kill grandpa because you know what? People want haircuts and they don't want to wear masks.
All right.
So apparently, if they can do that, then you shouldn't have the problem with abortion. And meanwhile, it's also a rights issue. Okay, and in order to do what you're talking about and have somebody come, like have a baby come to birth all the way through, you're talking about taking away the woman's rights at that point. And we already have.
She wants to have the legs of her baby removed.
No, I'm talking about the straight
How
abortion.
dare you trample her rights?
So I'm talking about abortion.
I'm talking about having her
And
legs.
no other legal instance are you allowed to force somebody else to use their body in a way like that. Look at blood transfusions. It's a rare blood transfusion. You cannot force a father, for example, to give a blood transfusion where a child is going to die without it. It's a rare genetic disorder. But in this, we're making an exception, which strikes me as ridiculous.
How dare you
So,
trample?
do you think a biological parent has the obligation to, for example, like let's say, my child needs a kidney. Do you think I have a moral or legal obligation? I must give them one.
I don't believe I can justify that biblically.
Okay. And he's asking you the kind of same question. He's asking you, look, if it was the case, and again, it's a silly thing, but I mean, since it is physically possible, a doctor could remove some like legs just to hobble a child for whatever reason. He's asking you,
Benefit.
whatever the reason might be. He's asking you to justify
A
using
welfare witch.
Okay, fine.
That's what he's saying.
All right, so let's say the mother wants to get on some kind of dole where the child is crippled, and so therefore they get money out of it. He's asking you, what in your ethical framework would disallow that? What would be a moral thing that prohibits that? Right? Would be morally non-obligatory. As a matter of fact, it would be forbidden to do such a thing. Right? He's asking you how you would justify that, basically. So, and by the way, it's a fair question. I mean, it's just odd, but it's nothing. It can happen, right? So it's not like it's a possibility. It's not like saying, hey, hypothetically, if I want to put sew wings on my kid, so he can fly, that would be, silly, right? Because that can't happen. But this is something that could happen. It's probably, obviously, would never happen because a doctor would lose their license. But what would you say to that? I mean, what in your moral framework disallows that?
You asking me or Sai?
You.
That was directed to
You.
asking me?
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about the idea of removing the legs until it comes to birth.
Yeah, to cripple, so the mother can get benefits. Like, what prevents that, ethically speaking?
Well, I technically already answered, but I'll answer it again. Maybe I wasn't clear. So again, we're dealing with potential life versus already existing life. And the entire principle for abortion and how it works is kind of based on the idea of you're dealing with potential life, and the further along it gets, the more it stops being a potential life and it's going to become an existing life. So if you're going to do a surgical procedure on, let's say, a 2-month-old fetus, at that point you are making a decision based on the assumption that it is going to come to full potentiality, and in that point you have to treat that decision in the full context of it being a fully born human being. And at that point, that violates any ethical considerations, because now you're dealing with this is going to have an inevitable impact on the fully born.
So it'd be cruel to limit a child's potential by making them it more difficult for their life, assuming they're going to have a full life expectancy then. Because it's clearly going to make their life more difficult, which I think is unethical, right?
Essentially, yeah.
Okay.
So just so we have this clear, it's not unethical to kill it, but it's unethical to remove its legs. Thanks. I'm willing to have,
Well,
to have
because-
your world
because
stated as such.
yeah, but simply put, there's no theological considerations because abortion is legal, right? So you can't say that it's unethical to have abortion if it is legal.
Well, I can
at least,
say
at least deontologically, right? At least according to some kind of moral
slavery was
duty, right?
unethical when it was legal.
In your worldview, sure, it's unethical. I get that, right?
Yeah.
So was slavery, and it was legal. So, I mean, the legality has nothing to do with it.
So you'd be an absolutist on that. It is more.
And he's coming from the position that he doesn't view, despite all the evidence to the contrary, that he doesn't view any difference between, let's say, like a 1-day-old fetus and a fully born being. So because he refuses to make that distinction, as far as he's concerned, he's actually scoring some kind of point with the question on, cutting the legs off the baby, because he's not even acknowledging the idea of potentiality.
Listen, I'm quite content to have you say publicly that it's not okay to remove this baby's legs, but it's okay to kill it. I'm quite content to leave it at that.
Yeah, you see, it's a different point of view.
Well, it's an appeal to emotion. Because it's making it sound much worse than it is.
It's very emotional.
It's an appeal to emotion.
It's an emotion, sure. Yeah. You're killing a zygote, right? You're killing
I think it's very successful. Well, I mean, you're taking the legs off the zygote too, according to your world. So what? It's just a clump of cells.
Well, I look at it just a couple cells. That is true.
I mean, it's essentially a fallacy. It's a reductive ad absurdum.
I also look at something that.
You're not kidding.
But my perspective is different, right?
You're presenting an entire argument as a ridiculous argument. You're trying to win points by presenting a ridiculous, absurd argument, and it might work.
It might be almost the order.
Like good for you, but for
The
people,
thing is,
like even like I know
let's
people
get
who
this
are pro-life, even they would say that's a ridiculous.
Okay,
They argue
let's
for
just be
the
clear.
position of potential
Let's just be clear. Let's just be clear.
Go ahead and repeat it.
Are you saying that it is okay to kill the child at 2 months, but it's not okay to remove the child's legs?
Well, I don't view it as killing. That's the thing. I don't view it as killing.
To take off its head. It's okay to take off its head, but not its legs.
But
Is that basically what you're saying?
From my perspective, especially as a Jew, it's not killing.
So okay. Let's say, forget the word killing. It's okay to remove
Yeah,
its
we
head.
should, because
It's okay to remove its head, but not.
the fetus to a human being. So yeah,
It's
it's
okay to
absolutely
remove.
killing.
It's okay to remove its head, but not its legs. Is that what you're saying?
No, I'm saying that it is okay to do with a fetus as opposed to a human being. Yes.
All right, so let me ask you this. I know I got a little background from my AC. It's too hot in here. I can't survive without it right now. So let me ask you this side. So by analogy, people who advocate for the death penalty, God advocated for the death penalty. God killed people, right? So what is it? Wait a minute. You can kill people, but for example, punishment. We can have capital punishment, but you can't have cruel and unusual punishment, right? You can't torture somebody in prison, but you can execute them, right? There are different things in society where one is morally egregious than the other because one is state sanctioned, right? One is actually approved by society to have capital punishment, and again, God seemed to have been favored for capital punishment. He wanted to kill everybody, man. According to he killed billions of people or whatever it was, and only left 8.
He killed everybody who's ever died.
No, they literally terminated their life like by murdering them.
Everybody who's ever died.
By murdering?
You wanted to answer the question for Sai since he's not going to.
Yeah, go ahead.
There was no question. What was the question?
So what Steve is talking about is the idea that God, if you look at, I'm going to do it in Tanakh because I know you don't like talking about the Christian Bible. So if you look at examples in Tanakh, you see that there are many examples of God doing. And this gets into the idea of whether or not God is good, what he does is right. So he is clearly killed. He is killed. He is given instructions to kill. He is to do it in your name. From the perspective of a believer, if you accept the idea that God is good, and that's based on the principle that because God says it, therefore it is good, no matter how outrageous it might seem to you, then yeah, therefore from their perspective, if God kills somebody, it's good because he's God and he says it's good. That's essentially what it comes right down to. That would be my answer.
Not my view.
What?
Not my view.
Yeah, I think more divine.
Well, you can elaborate on it.
I can, but I'm not interested in having a discussion with somebody who's not justified rationality.
I think divine command theory was more the position of God says something is good, and the moral thing to do is just obey God, right? You obeying God is what makes it moral, rather than just under divine command theory.
No, nature and character is what make it moral.
Well, as I understand ethical subjectivism, it's more the abeyance of the actual law, right? God's law.
Not subjective.
Well, you don't hold to divine command theory? That whatever God says is good, and you obey it, that's being moral?
No, I would say that God says things according to his nature.
And then if you obey it, that's good, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And conforming to his nature.
And
That's what he bases his feelings on.
And it comes
Is
from.
God evil?
Oh, hang on. And it comes
Is
from.
God ever evil? Does he ever
No.
do evil? Okay, then it is your view, because you're saying everything God does is good, and it's his nature to be good, so therefore to do anything he says to do or he does is good. So,
No,
I mean, you just contradicted yourself again.
You were saying
And I'm supporting you.
You were saying the basis of morality, and I'm saying that's not the basis of morality. It's not based on his command, it's based on his character.
Well, let me tell you why it's ethical subjectivism. I am Moon 5 hours says, sorry for getting all up in my feelings. Getting all up in my feelings, LOL. No problem, Moon. You're allowed to. Perfectly fine. Don't even sweat it. You're perfectly allowed to. No, the reason I talk about ethical subjectivism is because, look, if God is going to tell you what the moral choice should be, right? If you have a moral decision and you are going to do some kind of normative ethics, God's going to say, this is what you need to do, right? And you have it somehow, he came up with it for whatever reason, whether, you get it all flow dilemma, but for the most part, he said this is what it is. The problem is that you don't have any epistemic access to that, right? You can read about it, right? But it's still a subjective, right? It's not an objective fact of the matter, right? For example, I could feel something, right? I can sense it. I feel pain, but my pain is subjective. You cannot ever experience my pain. It's forever epistemically isolated from you. God, if God has these rules, they're only known to him why he has these rules. It could be arbitrary. You could have something of higher value why he has these rules, which would be kind of odd, but it's possible. But we don't know why he has these rules. He's just telling you these are the rules. You can't.
No, we do know why he has these rules.
We really
Based on
don't.
his nature and character.
But we don't. You don't know that. You're just assuming that. It's presup. You're presupping that. Which is so
That's what the Bible said.
But you're presupping that, so you don't know it.
Are you saying that God can't make us know that?
You're saying that. You can't justify it. If you're presupping it, presup is not knowledge, right? It can't be justified, correct?
No, I'm saying that God can reveal things to us such that we can know them for certain, including his nature and character.
But you're presupping that. You're not seeing the point here. So if God says this is what the moral act is, it is subjective. You have no way to epistemically ever access it.
So God makes us know things for certain.
But you couldn't ever access it independently. That makes it subjective.
Are you saying that God cannot make us know things for certain?
You're missing the whole point here.
No, it's a simple question. Are you saying that God cannot make us know?
Oh, well, I don't believe in God, so I don't know what God cannot do. But
okay, but you're not saying.
Let's say that he could.
You're not saying.
Let's say that he could.
Saying it's impossible for God to exist.
Yeah. Sure. Let's say that he
according to his
could.
words, makes us know things for certain.
Let's say that he could.
That's my worldview.
Let's say that he could. Let's say he can make you know for certain.
He does.
Okay.
Yeah.
That still doesn't take away from the fact that he's just making you know this. You're not objectively doing it. You're not looking at anything objectively. You're just getting the information fed to you, right? If God to be objective, it would be like, okay, let's say like Philip and I want to play chess. Play chess. I always do this. Play chess. And I say, hey, let's play chess. We have the rules of chess that objectively I can read it, go, this is the rules. He can agree, these are the rules. You have no idea what God's rules are, only because he just told you that these are the rules, and you presupposed that they are correct, and he's telling you in a way that you know for sure. That's all presup, right? You have no ability to objectively verify
You're saying that I can know things for certain, but I can't really know things for certain. Is that what you're saying?
No, I've given you the premise that it's possible that God could tell you something from certain, but even if he did, it's still subjective.
Okay, so you're saying I can know things for certain, but it's subjective.
I give you an example. If God could tell you that I'm experiencing pain, he can let you know in a way that you know for certain I'm experiencing pain. But there's no possible way you can ever experience my pain, is there? Because it's my pain.
I don't have to.
Because that makes it subjective. There you go. That's why it's not subjective.
Not my knowledge of you having pain, of the truth claim of you having pain. That's not subjective.
But you can't experience my pain. It's sense data that's my own, which makes it subjective.
I don't have to experience your pain to know for certain that you're experiencing pain.
Right. You can know that I'm experiencing it, but you cannot experience it yourself. That's the whole point. That's what makes it subjective.
No, but can I objectively know that you're experiencing pain?
Sure, you can objectively know that I experience pain, but that's not what the argument is. The argument is not that can you objectively know that I experience pain. The argument is that you cannot experience my pain. Therefore, my pain itself, not the knowledge of my pain, my actual pain.
I never said I could experience your pain.
Right, and you can't experience the same thing. You cannot know the mind of God. You cannot say that God. You cannot experience what He experiences for why He is justified to say this is what's right and wrong. You're just taking it axiomatically. Right, that's ethical subjectivism.
No, I can know for certain what God commands.
But that doesn't matter when you know for
Steve,
certain what he commands. He's
Can
missing the
I
point
see
here,
if I'm
right?
getting what you're getting at? Can I try wording it?
Sure, go ahead. Knock yourself out.
You can tell me, because I think
it's
I know
missing the
what you're
point.
getting at.
Yeah, okay.
You're kind of getting at the idea that, like, essentially because we are imperfect human beings who are limited by our senses and how we work as a creature,
Yeah, we filter
that
everything
if God communicates with us, even when he communicates with us, we are still limited by that. Is that kind of the idea? Like, we're limited.
Yeah, but
I'm asking Steve if that's what he means.
in the sense data way of looking at something, right? I'm experiencing something, like my water bottle here, right? I perceive something to exist here, right? Now, you could be a mereological nihilist, and you could say, look, there's no actual object here. It's just a bunch of particles that are, primitives that are rearranged to be a bottle, right? But my sense is saying that I'm seeing something, correct? He cannot experience what I'm experiencing. That sense data is unique to me,
Yes.
and if I'm seeing this bottle, he could be seeing the bottle too. We could experience it quite differently. But he has no way to ever epistemically reach into my head and experience what I'm experiencing. So if God says, these are the rules, he's just telling you this. Now you can objectively know that these are the rules. I can tell Phil, hey, these are the rules of chess, right? These are the rules, right? I can objectively, he can know these are the rules. But he can't go validate that. He can't objectively go look to find the rules unless he has the rules somewhere to look for them, right? You're just presupposing that these rules exist. You're going to call that the Bible. That is the Word of God, right? But that's just a precept. It's not experiencing what God has said. I have these rules for these particular reasons. Like, what is the reason why God has given a certain commandment? Why does he do this? And you can't say it's just good, right? You can't say it's...
No, I would say because they're based on his character. For instance, stealing is wrong because God is not a thief.
But that's not an answer.
Adultery is wrong because God is perfectly faithful.
But those
Lying is wrong because God is perfectly honest.
But that's,
Steve, I'd
that's just rephrasing. That's just
I'd
rephrasing.
like to
I'm not
help you try to help him
that's
get this,
sure.
but I don't
That's
feel
real
allowed
quick.
to help
Yeah,
him
sure.
get it, so
Real
I'm
quick,
just going to let you do it for a bit more.
No, you can have it real quick. It's just like saying, I'm not a thief because I don't steal. Okay, that doesn't tell you anything.
No, you're not God.
But why is it prescriptively the case that you shouldn't steal?
Because we're commanded to be his imitators, Ephesians 5 verse 1.
But
We're
why?
commanded to,
But why?
we're created in his image, and our responsibility on earth is to imitate
But
him. That's what we're commanded to do.
But God could have said, hey, stealing is good. Why didn't he?
No, because
Okay.
the laws are based on his character.
So he's beholden to a higher value. There's something about not stealing God has to obey. It's the value of not stealing that's higher than
It's
God
his
commanding
character.
it.
He's not a thief.
Again, I don't think he's understanding this, but go ahead, Phil.
I don't think he is. Yeah.
No,
I'd also say that just as an addition, that if God was a thief, then it would be good that God was a thief because he's God.
Yeah, he could do that, right? I mean,
What he does,
could do it, right?
I mean, there's even examples of him basically being essentially a thief in the Bible. He's running a honeypot scheme. I mean, that's what I described earlier. And normally we would, as human beings, we would find that abhorrent, but it's God doing it. So if you're a believer, well, then, as I would put it, because that's his character.
Well, you would appeal to an absolute standard that you can't justify, so it's nonsensical.
Thanks for acknowledging that.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, he does. Again, I don't know what his theory of justification is. People know I do tend to foundationalism, but I got no problem with inherentism or coherentism, whatever. Pick your point.
Yeah.
Right. There's no right answer to that, right?
I came into this like my attitude is like I haven't even thought about him in 6 years. So for all I know, he's changed, and like I'm willing to have a virtuous, career with him. But right from the start, he made it pretty clear he wasn't interested in that. So I was just like, yeah, whatever.
Well, yeah, it's hard. Okay, but here's the thing. It's hard when you have baggage, right? I mean, I happen to know Syed. We go pretty way back, and we're friends. I'm not going to front. I like the guy. People know this. I get so much crap for it, but whatever. He probably gets crap.
You just lost 1,000 subscribers.
Right? Yeah, I don't do this for views. Trust me. I don't. Whatever. But the thing is that when you go into a discussion, there is something called a cooperative principle, right? And you should put some of those things aside to try to at least steelman people's positions. At least try to look at the best possible light of what they're trying to say. If people who haven't seen it, go watch Caffeine Corner. Cheshire and I talk about these things frequently. We talked about Grice's maxims the other day and Graham's hierarchy. And it is kind of infuriating when people have an honest dialogue, and you just assume they're not being honest, right? They're being disingenuous.
I knew it was going to go this way because I put that Facebook post up where I was being kind of a dick. I sent you a message about it because I felt bad about it after Cyber, where I said, oh, and hey, I was just having some fun in those comments there. I'm sorry if it pissed you off or hurt your feelings or any shit like that. I didn't intend any meanness towards you or anything. And then I said, well, the OP was kind of mean, so yeah, I was a dick. You want to call me on it? You totally got me there. And and you said nothing back, and then you proceeded to just troll and kind of be the way you were being on Twitter, and at that point I knew that there was no way this conversation was going to go well, because I had offered you an olive branch, and you basically just ignored it. So of course I knew it was going to go this way, because that's how he intended it to go, because that's how he wanted it to go.
Well, the thing is, I have a biblical mandate on how I'm supposed to address folly. I answer a fool according to his folly, lest he be wise in his own eyes.
Yeah, it's called aggressive Christianity. We used to call
No,
it
it's called the Bible.
Christianity.
Proverbs 26.
No, there's actually like different ways you can approach proselytizing. The way you're doing it is this old 1980s style where you're aggressive and hostile in the hopes of getting a reaction. And, you know, I'm trying not to be insulting here, but it was always considered kind of dickish.
All right, let me ask you, by the way, I'm not going to, both of you guys will live like that Twitter, but so am I, so no judging, right? Twitter's Twitter. So
Yeah, I didn't take it personally.
Not at all.
I knew
No,
he was trolling, but I was like,
nothing is personal on
everybody's an
Twitter,
asshole
man.
Twitter. That's our job there.
Look,
Be an asshole.
just literally 2 minutes before we went live, you guys saw me typing. I was talking to an atheist that got triggered literally because he didn't understand the principle about balance and loss include the middle. I was like, he literally told me he doesn't believe that I exist. I was like, okay, so you don't believe that I exist, but you're talking to me. He's like, well, I'm not saying that, but I'm like, look, you either believe or you don't believe. This is simple logic here. I'm not trying to like screw in your head here. But instead of saying, okay, well, I have to take one or the other because it's logic.
Nice
Fuck,
move,
right?
Steve.
Because you're taking it personal.
That's
You're having
awesome.
tone with me. You know, you're getting aggressive. I'm like, Twitter, how am I getting aggressive? I've had these discussions forever. Sai, how many times have you had these types of discussions? Can you even count if you had to? Yeah, I mean, it's just, we don't
Did it happen on Twitter?
It literally happened on Twitter, like on my Twitter page, like 2 minutes before we went live. You guys can go check out my Twitter page if you're not
I think
following me on
most
Twitter.
people like me go to he was probably like me. Most people go to Twitter when they're just kind of frustrated and angry and pissed off, and they don't want to yell at somebody. That's how I don't know how you use Twitter. Like I had to read here to have a conversation with him because normally my attitude on Twitter is I'm just going on there to blow up steam. But then I didn't want to I was like, okay, I'm gonna try to back it down, be a decent, nice person, be a mensch. You know, but he wasn't having it.
Yeah, you're a good Jew boy, aren't you?
Yeah.
Your mom would be proud of you.
You can ask my booby.
Yeah.
She loves my hair.
Yeah, my mom is not the quintessential Jew, but yeah, she used to make matzo bra for us. I just love matzo bra.
Oh yeah. Yeah. My mom was. Everything I did made her nervous. That was her catchphrase. Oh, you're making me nervous. But it's like one of the Jewish mother things to say.
But again, what happens on Twitter? We all expect the worst on Twitter. But I was kind of hoping you guys would have a little bit more of a dialogue. I don't know what the hell topic we went. I mean, this like 6,000.
I knew it was gonna go.
It's not surprising.
I even offered to you, Sai, Aaron and I had a bet about whether this would happen, and you jumped in on it. And I said, hey, I'll give you the same. Okay, it's a thing that I do with people I know.
Who'd you bet?
It's called a dude bet.
Who'd you bet?
No, I'm sorry, it's a bro bet. And bro bet consists of basically you just make a random bet about something, and the winner does drinks. They pay the first.
Yeah. Yeah. Who'd you bet?
So I lost it, and technically I lost it to him. And
who'd you bet?
bro bets are sacred, so I will honor it if he wants to take me up.
Yeah. No. But who'd you bet? You bet Sai?
Well, I bet Aaron that he would not do that.
Aaron Rock?
And Aaron thought I lost, and I was like, I don't know, see, and then Sai jumped in and said, I'll take that action, and I said,
yeah, you know what? Hey,
these are sacred bets, bro bets,
look,
okay?
Even
God totally, he sanctifies them.
I hope
so. They have to be on.
I hope Aaron watches this, because again, I know if we have our differences, I happen to like Aaron an hell of a lot. He may not get that, and we may never be able to rectify things, but I got no ill will against the guy at all. I think, we stand together on phylogeny and biology. It's a shame there's philosophical differences, but the fact is that I'm right. I'm not gonna capitulate that, right? But I would love to buy a beer for him too.
Towards you.
Oh my God, dude, it's ridiculous. I mean,
You should have been the agnostic atheist thing.
Yeah.
We'll do that another time. Yeah.
Well,
because
you know what? That was the guy that asked me about it. He's like, "What's your position on this?" And I showed my blogs and blah blah blah. But I was just trying to explain the basic logic. I wasn't I've seen Sai and Darth Deity even. Well, basically for certain people they will stop and they'll say, "Okay, let me explain this to you to help your argument." Right? I've seen it happen. Right? And they're not trying to manipulate anybody at that point. They're not trying to, for example, Hume's problem of induction. Okay, people have tried to explain to atheists. This is what it is, okay? We're trying to help you with this. Don't sit there and try to justify the use of induction by saying, oh, well, induction works tomorrow, because we all know that's fallacious, right? So we try to help people, and they think that we're being either aggressive or being snobbish or being arrogant or being rude or being narcissistic, and it's not at all. It is the fact that we want people to have better arguments, whether you're a theist or atheist. And when you have bad arguments, like I'm doing a segment with Reasons to Believe with Dr. Buzz Rana on this very thing: atheist bad arguments and theist bad arguments. Right? We're gonna do the gambit. Right? So it's weird when you see people reject that. It's weird when you see somebody say like, "Look, I accept logic," and then you say, "Okay, do you believe that I exist, or you do not believe that I exist? Which is it? You cannot have any other options. Those are jointly exhaustive and mutually exclusive from each other, right? Would you agree, Stein? There's no other options in logic. And you have an atheist denies that. How is that going to look to the theist? The theist is going to look on and go, man, these new atheists, they're just dumb as shit, right? And that's infuriating to somebody like me, who's a non-believer. I'm in that camp, right? I don't want to be lumped in with these people.
I mean, you're familiar enough with me, Steve, to see the videos that I do have productive conversations
I've
with some
seen you
people
cry sometimes.
who profess atheism, but I like Ray Comfort's adage, "Lot of the proud, grace of the humble." And I believe that Phil is one of those people who has been very proud in his accusations against me and his posts about me. So if he were to come,
but we already showed that wasn't true.
If you were to come from a
you were
humble,
stuck. I'm sorry, you have chosen to be pissed at me. That's literally what's going on.
You did come with a little chip on your shoulder about him. But
what?
Where he did, so I did come with a little chip on his shoulder about you.
Yeah, like I apologized to him for one thing, I apologized to him for another. As far as the backing down thing, I'm just like, hey, whatever, forget about it. You say you don't back down, you didn't back down, I'm cool with that. But he wanted to be pissed at me coming in.
One of the things did come to mind, though, that you simply said about me that was false on Twitter. You said that I said something about masks, people shouldn't wear masks because they're ineffective. That's an outright, blatant lie. I've never said that.
You linked a video which was saying that. Now, if you're saying that you don't believe it was in that video, then you're going to have to state that. How am I going to know it?
No, people asked me about that video. I said I merely posted it because at the end of the video he was talking about the dangers of wearing masks.
Well, can we ask your opinion on it? I mean,
you got to be more careful with that.
Can we ask
No,
your
I don't.
opinion on it? Well,
yeah, but you didn't explain it to me.
So you do wear a mask when you go out, right?
Infrequently.
Okay. Do you think that churches are allowed to open? Do you think that they should be mandated that they wear masks?
No.
Okay. Do you think that they should be mandated that they can't open? I mean, do you think that's
no?
Okay. So you're like Pastor, like Greg Locke, obviously. We all know Greg.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, some people in the chat last night were attributing comments to him that I found troubling, but I don't know whether he said them or not.
Yeah. I mean, you watched the show that we talked about, Greg Locke, and so he advocates it's his religious freedom and society be damned when society says, look, we have to maintain certain kind of health standards. Matter of fact, you would agree that you can't walk into a store that says no shirt, no shoes, no service. You're okay with that, but if they ask you to wear a mask, there's a problem?
No, I'm absolutely okay with the store mandating that I wear a mask. I have no problem with that.
But not church. Why?
Yeah, well,
why?
I'm saying that they can, but I'm saying there's no biblical justification for doing that.
Okay, well.
You asked me whether they should or not. I don't think they should. I don't think stores should. But they're well within their rights to do it.
But do you think
it's a private business?
But do you think the government should be able to say, look, as a private business, your patrons have to wear a mask. If you go to church, you have to wear a mask. You don't think the government has a right to say that?
Well, it's very interesting because people can refuse service for not wearing a mask, but they can't refuse. But when somebody refuses to bake a cake for whatever reason, then the government says, you can't do that. So
that's an artistic.
They actually said
it's the inconsistency. It's the inconsistency that I find very problematic.
But that's a whataboutism, right? You're basically shifting it.
No, I'm saying the inconsistency.
And they actually said that the reason why baking a cake is that's an artistic thing, and you cannot force somebody to do something artistic, regardless. And there's some reasons to that, right? I mean, as much as I hate it, I think it's asinine that people won't bake a cake. But there are some arguments to be had because of artistic license. But like you can't say, look, I force you to as you're an artist, I'm going to commission you to make a portrait of me, right? You can say, look, I don't want to make a portrait of you. You have that right. You cannot force somebody to do that. But if I say, hey, this, I don't want to sell you copies because, some inherent property value, that's illegal as well as it should be. But I'm asking you, Cy,
I don't think it should be. I think that the public will take care of that.
You don't think it should be? You don't think the government yeah, see, the problem, that doesn't work. I mean, remember Jim Crow?
No, it does work. It does work.
What does work?
The society doesn't make the rules themselves. Yeah, they don't take care of it. The government takes care of it. Oh, he's Canadian. Yeah, we're Americans. We're like. Fair enough.
I mean, I know the Canadians. Like, I have relatives in Canada. Don't get me wrong, and I can just they're nutsy up there sometimes. But Americans now we don't. I just want to make a quick point. What you're talking about with like the legality of the take and whatnot. Yeah, you get into these situations in law, and they actually like remember back. I don't. Remember back in like the 80s, 90s? Yeah, I know. They had the whole thing with like they had men's only clubs.
Yeah.
And if you notice, like if you look at how they actually handle the case law for that, it's usually done on a case by case basis because it's specific to each case in the sense of well, what's available in the area. So the idea is that we're going to try to give somebody the right to do the services, offer services they want to. Within the context, if there's literally nothing else in the area, then no, we have to give them access because they have to have the right to have the service.
Yeah, it has to do with their business model a lot too. Like.
Yeah, that's why it usually goes on a case by case basis. But the assumption is that if there is absolutely any way we can prevent the business, like the